guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Miranda, and today I wanted to talk about my favorite young adult books from when I was a teenager, which was a long time ago. I found myself going through my bookshelf and deciding what I wanted to keep and what no longer gelled with me, and I found that there were still a few young adult books from my time that I loved and that have withstood my maturing and growth both as a person and as a reader. And so I just wanted to talk about those today. So let's dive in. Number one is Eleanor Park by Rainbow Rowell, and this is actually a book I remember reading it as a teenager, and I remember liking it, but I wasn't wowed by it. I was like, this was good. I see the quality, but it wasn't a book that I was like hooked by. It wasn't something that I got incredibly invested in. And then I reread it a couple weeks ago in preparation for this video to see if I still wanted to keep it, and I cried while reading it. It was incredibly beautiful. The way that Rainbow Rowell progresses these characters as well as their relationship is quite beautiful and simple, but you can tell that there was a lot of thought and design that went into why she did the things that she did, and it was just a beautiful book. And the relationship between Eleanor and Park does seem simple. The development of it is quite basic. However, she manages to slip in a lot of feeling in between the lines almost. It's like she slips in these one-liners that give you hints of the depth of feeling underneath the characters and the relationship, but for the most part, it's the reading between the lines that I found myself getting invested in. Those were the things she left space for the reader to really find their own way to connect with the characters, and that is something that I'm never really conscious about, and it would just really incredibly impressed me, and it made me really enjoy this book and really appreciate it immensely. And there is a quote that I did want to read in here. This is from Park's point of view. It does do a dual perspective between Eleanor and Park, and this is just the first sentence of a chapter that is Park's point of view. Eleanor was right. She never looked nice. She looked like art, and art wasn't supposed to look nice. It was supposed to make you feel something. And out of context, I realize it might not have the same impact, but it was something that it's about halfway through the book. That's the bookmark I had for it. And it was something that after reading the development of their relationship, it was just a beautiful thing to say, and it was a beautiful thing to write. And anyways, I could go on about this, but Eleanor and Park, I think, is a great book for young adults, but I actually appreciate it more now that I'm an adult. And so it's something that I would recommend to anybody, and it's definitely staying on my bookshelf. Okay, number two is actually something that I mentioned in my top 5 books that changed my life, fiction, and that is If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. And I try not to do repeat mentions of books just because I feel like I mention it once, I do my spiel, and it's out there for people to see. But this book falls into both categories of my favorite fiction books and my favorite young adult books. And it is worth talking about again because I don't remember hearing a lot of talk about this book when it did come out, when I did first read it. And it deserves recognition because it is a beautiful book. So it follows the protagonist, whose name I still don't remember. I should really learn. If it's told from her perspective solely, it is first person, and it is about her and her neighbor Finn, and it is the relationship between them. They have grown up together, known each other since they were little kids, and it is their love story, and it is incredibly beautiful and dark and sad, but also uplifting, and just it makes you feel so incredibly deeply. The way she wrote this was so incredibly beautiful. And I said it before, but this came out about the same time that The Fault in Our Stars was like the big thing as far as books and the movie and everything. And this book has no cancer in it, but it is so incredibly moving, and I found myself way more invested and moved by this book than I was ever by The Fault in Our Stars. And that is not to discount John Green's writing. It is a great book, but this book is raw in the way that The Fault in Our Stars was polished. And the ending in this book is probably one of my favorite endings in all the books that I have on my shelf. I think it encapsulates how I feel about this book so much that I will never be so happily ruined by the ending of a book. If he had been with me, everything would have been different. I wasn't with Finn on that August night, but I should have been. It was raining, of course, and he and Sylvie were arguing as he drove down the slick road. No one ever says what they were arguing about. Other people think it's not important. They do not know there is another story, the story that lurks between the facts. What they do not know, the cause of the argument, is crucial. So let me tell you. So, yeah, I just love this book, and I think that, again, it's for anybody, not just young adults. And I think that that's just an overall arching thing for these books. Highly recommend it. Number 3 is Just One Day by Gail Forman. Now, Gail Forman also wrote the If I Stay series, which also got turned into a movie. And I did read that. This was actually, I read this before If I Stay, and I read it before the movie came out for If I Stay. And I love this book. I remember reading it and I was, here's a glare. I remember reading it and I was hooked from the get-go. And I remember I read it, like in a night. I stayed up all night to finish reading it. And I hadn't read it since I was a teenager, and I reread it and I found myself just as invested as I was when I was a teenager. This book follows Allison Healy. She is on a Europe trip for teens. It's like a graduation thing. She's like the good girl. She likes a plan, she sticks to the plan, and that is who she is. And then she finds herself meeting this boy named Willem, and they go on an adventure, and she basically throws caution to the wind, and for just one day she lets go and lets Willem just later on an adventure through Paris. And it is an incredibly beautiful story. The way that Gail Forman wrote this really like you feel like you're walking through Europe with them. The way she describes the scenery and how she intermingles that with the story and the progression of Willem and Allison's relationship is just beautiful. And it's a thick book. It's what, 400 pages? I believe. Yeah, it's just under 400 pages. A good bit of it is literally just that one day. And for me, normally books like that, they drag on. I feel like I'm like reading just the same thing over and over again. But this book moves at a pace that feels faster than it is. And it really draws you in. And it's just incredibly well written, like I said. And if you just want to feel like you have gone on a mini vacation to Europe without leaving your bedroom, this book did that for me. I felt like I was there, and I felt like I was seeing the sights they were seeing, experiencing the smells, all the sensations that they were, without ever leaving my room. So this is a book that I really do recommend. And again, it's written very maturely. It doesn't feel like a teen book. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I just love this book. So those are the 3 that I'm keeping on my shelf that I absolutely love, will read again. And then I have 3 that I would consider honorable mentions that I just wanted to include because I do consider them to be good books, but they're not books that are staying on my shelf. So I just wanted to put that little note in there because they're things that I recommend, but they're not necessarily things that I personally am all for anymore, if that makes sense. So number 1 for that is There You'll Find Me by Jenny B. Jones. Not Junie B. Jones. I think of that every time I see this, but Jenny B. Jones. And this is a book that I've had for a long time, and this was a book that I loved for a long time. This is probably the most reread book in this entire video, and for good reason. This book is beautifully written, and it has so many different characters, supporting characters, and dynamics within it that it is quite a complex story that is in a pretty short book. So it follows Finley St. Clair as she goes to Ireland for a semester abroad program, and it basically is her story through all the tragedies that she's experienced in her life. Her brother Will died a year before this, I believe, and she's still dealing with the loss of that. she kind of spiraled after his death and is just now coming out of that darkness and finding herself now without her brother and without the vices that she used to get through his death. And in the midst of her semester abroad, she meets Beckett Rush, who is a famous movie star in Ireland who is filming the next, I think it's supposed to be like a Twilight, like off-brand Twilight for this book, but he's kind of like that level of like teen heartthrob. And they meet and she wants nothing to do with him, and he very clearly wants to pursue her, and they become friends, and then she becomes his like assistant to help him run lines and stuff. And the progression of their relationship is really nice. It's very much a friends to more relationship, and it happens quite organically, which I really like. And in the midst of that, trigger warning, in the midst of that, it's also, there is talks of Finley and her recovery from her eating disorder and all of that. So within this book is very complex characters that you really connect to, and there's a lot of heavy topics in here that is like, that should make a story quite heavy, and yet the way it is written, you find yourself smiling and you find yourself rooting for the characters and really hoping for a happy ending for them all. And it really draws you into a world and a whole environment that you can get lost in. It's a full encompassing story, which I really appreciate. There is talk of like faith and God and Bible verses and all of that stuff in here, which is why it's something that I do kind of put an asterisk on. Not that it's like a bad thing. I read it now and I still connect to it and I still feel that pull of emotion, but I just want to put that in there because I know that there are people that just don't want to read about that, and so there is that in here. It is an incredibly beautiful book, and it makes you feel very deeply about the characters and about the story and the message behind it, and it's just quite beautiful. And so There You'll Find Me by Jenny B. Jones. The next one is Blade Silver by Melody Carlson. Now this one is also, I believe, a faith-based author. It only really starts talking about God and faith in the last little bit, but I did want to put that in here as well. But it's this book is also is a giant trigger warning. This book is about self-harm. And it's basically, it follows Ruth Wallace and the story of her recovery from cutting herself. The reason that this is on my I will recommend it but I'm not keeping it list is there's a couple reasons. Number one is it is a very dark book, and that is a good thing. It's part of why I'm recommending it, is because I feel like there's not many books out there that you will read that are strictly about a girl, the fact that she cuts herself, why, and her journey of healing. And I love this book for that reason. I think it's a topic that needs more conversation, and the fact that it was written for young adults, I think, brings a really great story to younger people who are struggling with overwhelming emotions that could lead to self-harm. This really brings that perspective. And the reason that it is on the list of why I'm not keeping it is because I did find the writing quite simplified. I felt like there could have been more work done to develop the characters and to develop Ruth specifically. And it is very much written for young adults. I feel like it's not very expansive, I guess is the word. The characters are to the point. You basically get the idea of who they are from the first couple of sentences that they're introduced, and then that's who they are. There's no true expansion really, except for the main character. She gets obviously a growth, but otherwise it's just a very to the point book, and it's not very dynamic, I guess. So for that reason, it is on the lesser side of quality, I would say. Nevertheless, I still feel like it is an important thing to talk about, and it is an important book. Blade Silver by Melody Carlson. The final book for this video is actually one I'm reading right now, so I do want to put in a note that I have not finished it, so I have no idea what my final opinion will be, but I've been so impressed by what I've read so far that I did want to include it. We All Looked Up by Tommy Wallach. Wallach. I hope that's how you pronounce it. But this book is a young adult book. I've had it on my shelf for years. The copyright is 2015, and I'm pretty sure I got it off the New Arrivals shelf at Barnes & Noble, and I have never read it. It has sat on my shelf for 7 years, and I just started it last night, and I obviously got hooked because I read that much, and I stayed up late, and I'm very tired because of it, but I am so impressed with the style of writing that Tommy brings to this book. It is creative and dynamic, and there's a lot of characters in here. Sorry, I keep bumping my mic. There's a lot of characters in here, and he found a way to bring an individual voice to each of the characters that is an identifiable thing. And it kind of reminds me of The Breakfast Club in a way, and I'm really liking it. So I will read the premise just because I'm not entirely sure 100% what this book is about yet, just because I'm only that far in, but I did want to read it. Before our door came, we let ourselves be defined by labels: the athlete, the slut, the slacker, the overachiever. But then we all looked up, and everything changed. They said the asteroid would be here in 2 months. That gave us 2 months to leave our labels behind. 2 months to become something bigger than what we'd been. Something that would last even after the end. 2 months to really live. So far what I've read is like kind of the beginning of that realization of the world very well may end in 2 months, and how do I want to spend the last 2 months of my life? And so the way the characters have been set up, I feel like I already know who each individual person is, even though they pretty much only got 1 chapter of character development each. The way the writer put it all together was, and it's interesting because it's not even just through like, these are this person's interests, this is what this person was doing that day. It's through the writing style that he really gives each character a voice, where I feel like I'm really getting to know their inner thoughts and how they think. That is really unique and hard to do. It's hard to get that much nuance within a character in such a short amount of time, and he does it very, very well. Now, I have skipped forward a little bit just because I was curious to see where this book was headed, because so far it's a fairly lighthearted read. It gets dark, I will say that, because the world is ending. So basically, it's the story of how these five or six teenagers navigate the world ending and the chaos that ensues from society believing that they have nothing to lose, and how these people band together to try and survive what's going on around them. And it gets chaotic, and I'm a little like nervous for that. I don't think it's going to be as lighthearted a read as I thought it'd be, but it's got a unique voice, and I think that's the thing that I'm most impressed by. I mean, every book has their own unique style. Like, Just One Day has its own unique voice that is Gail Forman. The same can be said for If You Had Been With Me or Eleanor Park. But We All Looked Up has such a unique pattern and thought process behind it that I found myself reading it and thinking, I haven't read this story yet. And it's not even like the plot or of anything like that, because like I said, it kind of reminds me of The Breakfast Club, but it's just the way that Tommy Wallach writes. I've never quite experienced this style and this voice before, and I'm just excited about it because it is a very unique thing. And yeah, I just wanted to put that in here because there's already some great, like, there's a lot of talk of philosophy so far, and there's a lot of just little insights that are really relatable and are just things that I sat and I went, I've never read somebody put that into words before. I don't know, there's like a poetic thing to it too. It's quite beautiful, and even if in the end I find that I don't quite resonate with the book, which I'm not sure which way I'll go, it's not my usual type of book, so it could very well go that way, I will say that I still am really intrigued by his writing and his style. So I did want to put that in here as just an honorable mention that I'm impressed with. We All Looked Up by Tommy Wallach. Those are the young adult books, and that was my thoughts on them. I hope that it all made sense. I feel a little scatterbrained today, but yeah, that was pretty much it. I hope you liked, and if you have read any of them, please comment below and let me know your thoughts, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!